an upscale cafe in the heart of downtown. A man in a simple button-down shirt walked in, holding a small bouquet of flowers. He glanced around looking for someone, then stopped in front of a young woman in a wheelchair near the window. "Are you Anna?" He smiled. She looked up, surprised. "I think you're at the wrong table." "Oh, sorry, I thought—" He started to leave, but the pure sadness in her eyes made him hesitate. Outside, a light rain began to fall. He sat down, speaking softly. "Well, since I'm already lost, let me buy you a coffee." She looked at him, half confused, half curious, unaware that in a few minutes both their lives would change direction completely. Daniel Hayes, 35 years old, single dad, maintenance engineer, widower. His wife died after giving birth to 7-year-old Ellie. He worked while raising his daughter alone, simple and genuine. Friends pushed him to go on dates so you won't be so lonely. A message from a dating app. "Meet Anna at 7 p.m. Moonlight Cafe." He arrived early, nervous, holding a bouquet of wildflowers his daughter picked. "Daddy, take my good luck with you." Clara Voss, 27 years old, the woman in the wheelchair, the only daughter of Robert Voss, CEO of Voss Industries. Her father was a strict billionaire. 3 years ago, an accident left her unable to walk. She lived in isolation, rarely going out. Today, her best friend forced her out for coffee to see that the sky is still beautiful. When Daniel walked in, she thought he was a waiter. He stammered awkwardly, "I thought you were Anna." "I'm not." The atmosphere was strained, but he still sat down because no one had appeared on the other side of the cafe yet. He spoke gently, asking, "Do you come here often?" "Never," she answered briefly. "Actually, this is my first time too. Must be fate." She smiled slightly, her first real smile in months. The waiter mistakenly brought 2 cappuccinos. He laughed. "I guess they think we're together too," she replied. "People often see things wrong, and sometimes being wrong turns out to be right." The words made her go silent. At another table, a group of young men whispered mockingly, "Poor guy, stuck with the wheelchair girl." Daniel heard clearly. He turned to them. "Laughing at others is the fastest way to reveal how small you are." The cafe went silent. Clara looked at him, something warm and strange lighting up in her eyes. But Daniel wasn't finished. He stood up, walked over to their table, and placed a $20 bill down. "That's for your coffee. Here, use the change to buy some manners." The young men looked away, embarrassed. One of them muttered an apology. When Daniel returned to his seat, Clara was staring at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "Yes, I did. My daughter is 7 years old. I want her to grow up in a world where people defend each other, not tear each other down." "You have a daughter?" "Ellie. She's the reason I wake up every morning. She's the reason I'm here tonight, actually. She put a coin under my pillow and said she was wishing for me to find a friend." Clara's eyes softened. "She sounds special." "She is. She's everything." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the cafe noise fading into the background. Outside, the rain picked up, drops racing down the window beside them. Clara watched them, her fingers absently tracing patterns on the armrest of her wheelchair. "Do you believe in fate?" she asked suddenly. Daniel thought about it. "I believe in moments. Some moments change everything. Like the moment my daughter was born. Like the moment I sat down at the wrong table." She looked at him then, really looked at him. Not at his clothes or his flowers or his nervous smile. At him. At the kindness in his eyes, the gentleness in his voice, the way he saw her as a person, not a diagnosis. "What was Anna like?" Clara asked. "The woman you were supposed to meet?" Daniel pulled out his phone, checked the profile. "Says here she likes hiking, travel, adventure. Honestly, I was terrified. I haven't been on a date in 8 years. I don't hike. I barely leave the city. I was going to fake my way through dinner and probably never hear from her again." "Then why did you come?" "Because Ellie asked me to try. She said, 'Daddy, sometimes you have to be brave even when you're scared.' How do you argue with that?" Clara laughed, a real laugh that surprised even her. "Your daughter is wise." "She's 7 going on 70. The cafe lights dimmed slightly as evening settled in. Neither of them noticed that 2 hours had passed. Finally, Daniel's phone buzzed. A message. Anna, sorry, can't make it tonight. Family emergency. He showed Clara the screen. Looks like I really was at the wrong table all along. Clara smiled. Or maybe you were at exactly the right one. A barista later told a local newspaper, I've worked here 5 years. I've seen hundreds of first dates. That night was different. Those two talked like old friends reuniting, not strangers meeting. You could feel something rare happening. They both started talking honestly. Clara told him about the early days after her accident, not wanting to go outside because she feared people's stares. Daniel told her about juggling work and raising a child, and how Ellie put coins under her pillow. To wish for Daddy to have a friend, she laughed. Your daughter sounds wise. He asked, do you have anyone taking care of you? I have everything except freedom. They talked for hours, forgetting time. Daniel shared his dream of opening his own repair shop. Clara said she used to paint but put down her brushes after the accident. Paint again, he said. You don't need legs to see the sky. When she prepared to leave, he helped push her wheelchair to the door. She asked, why are you kind to strangers? Because I once hoped someone would be kind to my daughter when I'm not around. That night, Clara opened her old sketchbook and drew the face of the man from the café. The next day, the news reported, Voss Industries CEO Robert Voss hospitalized after stroke. Daniel accidentally read the news on his phone but didn't connect it to the woman from yesterday. Clara sat quietly in the hospital corridor, thinking about that strange conversation. The only person who spoke to her like a normal person. A week later, Daniel received a call. Mr. Daniel Hayes, this is Clara. I wanted to thank you for that evening. Cheapest cup of coffee of my life, and the most valuable. Could you come to my house? There are a few things that need fixing. He arrived not knowing it was the Voss estate's mansion. The butler opened the door. Miss Voss is expecting you. He was shocked to see Clara on the second-floor balcony, her wheelchair among the flower gardens. This is your house? I forgot to mention who I am. Do you still want to help me fix things? I came for a friend who needed help, not for an address. She smiled, and he felt only tenderness. For the first time, Clara felt truly seen, but their connection was deepening in ways neither expected. Daniel came back the next weekend to fix a broken railing. Ellie came with him, shy at first, hiding behind her father's leg. Clara wheeled herself over slowly. Hi, Ellie. Your dad told me about you. Ellie peeked out. Are you the lady from the wrong table? Clara laughed. I guess I am. Daddy says wrong tables can be right sometimes. Your daddy is a very smart man. By the end of the afternoon, Ellie was sitting on Clara's lap while Clara showed her how to sketch a bird. Daniel watched from across the garden, his heart doing something it hadn't done in years. That evening, as they were leaving, Clara called out to him. Daniel, wait. He turned back. Thank you for treating me like Clara, not like the girl in the wheelchair, not like the CEO's daughter, just Clara. That's all I see, he said simply. That's all there is to see. Over the next few weeks, Daniel found more and more reasons to visit. A loose hinge, a squeaky wheel, a door that stuck. Clara found more and more reasons to call him. They both knew these were excuses. Neither of them cared. One afternoon, Daniel brought lunch, simple sandwiches from a deli near his apartment. They ate in the garden, Clara's wheelchair parked on the stone path, Daniel sitting cross-legged on the grass beside her. I haven't had a sandwich like this in years, Clara said. Everything here is, prepared by chefs, served on china. This is real. It's just turkey and cheese. No, it's the first meal in 3 years where someone asked me what I wanted instead of telling me what I needed. Daniel reached up and took her hand. You deserve to be asked, Clara, about everything. She looked down at their joined hands. His were rough from work, scarred and calloused. Hers were soft, unused to labor, but together they fit. My father is going to find out about you eventually, she said quietly. He won't approve. Will you? Will I what? Will you approve? Of me? Of this? She squeezed his hand. I already do. That night, someone took a photograph. A long-distance shot through the garden gates, grainy but unmistakable. Clara Voss and an unknown man, holding hands. The photo reached Robert Voss's assistant before it reached the press. The storm was coming. The family's head of security later testified. "I protected the Voss family for 12 years. I've never seen Miss Clara smile like she did that spring. Whatever that man did, he gave her something we couldn't. Hope." 3 weeks later, Clara invited Daniel to help fix her old art studio. He brought Ellie to play. The little girl ran through the gardens calling out, "Miss Clara!" Clara laughed, a laugh that made the whole house brighter. When they were almost finished, the wheelchair got stuck on the stairs. Vanessa, Robert Voss's personal assistant, ran over. "Who gave you permission to touch Miss Voss's wheelchair?" Daniel was surprised. "I was just helping. Who are you? Some cheap handyman?" Clara's voice went cold. "He's my friend." "Friend?" Vanessa stepped back, shocked. First twist. Robert Voss woke up and heard his daughter had met a maintenance worker. He demanded to see Daniel. In the hospital room, he said, "What do you want from my daughter?" "Just to talk to her. I owe her a cup of coffee." The old man smiled coldly. "I've heard poor men have dreams too." Daniel replied, "And I've seen rich men lack dignity." Robert grew angry, but Clara's eyes stopped him. "Father, he's not like the people you think he is. You don't see how they're using you." News spread. Paparazzi captured photos of Clara smiling with a single dad mechanic. Tabloids ran, "Heiress in wheelchair romantically linked to garage worker." Robert was furious and demanded it stop. Clara went to Daniel's workshop. "My father wants me to stop seeing you." "And what do you want?" "I want to make my own choices." He looked at her. "Freedom isn't given. It's taken back." She grabbed his hand, not trembling for the first time. But Robert wasn't done. He called Daniel to his office downtown, a massive corner suite overlooking the city. "How much?" Robert asked, standing by the window. "Excuse me? How much money will it take for you to disappear from my daughter's life? Name your price. 100,000? 500,000? Daniel stood slowly. "You can't buy me, Mr. Voss. And you can't buy your daughter's happiness either. You don't understand what you're dealing with. Clara is fragile. She's been through trauma. She needs stability, protection. She needs to be seen. She needs to be heard. She needs someone who doesn't treat her like broken glass. And you think that's you? A mechanic with a 7-year-old daughter and no prospects." Daniel walked to the door, then turned back. "I think I'm someone who sees your daughter for who she is, not what she lost. If that makes me unworthy in your eyes, then we have very different definitions of worth." He left. Robert stood alone in his office, shaking with anger and something else he couldn't name. Fear, perhaps. Fear that this nobody was right. Second twist. 1 month later, Robert Voss's private plane experienced engine failure during a routine flight. The pilot passed out from cabin pressure loss. News reached home. Clara collapsed. Daniel ran to the airport. "I used to be a civilian pilot. Let me up there." He flew with the rescue team, piloted the backup aircraft, and landed safely. When Robert woke, he asked, "Who saved me?" "The man you said wasn't worthy of your daughter," Robert cried, and for the first time he grasped Daniel's hand. "Thank you for helping me understand what it means to be full." But there was more to the story. In the hospital, after the immediate danger passed, Robert asked to speak with Daniel alone. "Why did you do it?" the old man asked. "After everything I said to you, after I tried to pay you off, after I insulted you, why did you risk your life to save mine?" Daniel sat in the chair beside the hospital bed. "Because Clara loves you. And I—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I care about Clara. Which means I care about the people who matter to her, even when they don't care about me." Robert was quiet for a long time. Machines beeped softly in the background. Outside the window, the city glittered in the darkness. "I built an empire," Robert finally said. "I started with nothing and created something that employs 10,000 people. I thought that made me powerful. I thought that meant I knew what was important. You did know. Daniel said. You knew enough to build something that lasts. You just forgot what you were building it for. She was all I had left after her mother died. The accident, watching her fight through rehabilitation, seeing her lose hope. I thought if I controlled everything around her, I could protect her from more pain. But you can't control love, Mr. Voss, and you can't protect someone from living. Robert looked at him, really looked at him. You're not what I expected. Neither was your daughter. But sometimes the best things are the ones we don't see coming. 3 days later, Robert was released from the hospital. He called a family meeting. Clara, Daniel, and even little Ellie were invited to the Voss mansion. They gathered in the library, surrounded by books and family portraits. Robert stood, still weak but determined. Clara, I've spent 3 years trying to keep you safe, and in doing so, I kept you from living. I was wrong. Clara started to speak, but he raised his hand. Daniel, I judged you without knowing you. I assumed your worth based on your bank account instead of your character. I was wrong about that too. He walked over to where they sat together on the sofa and extended his hand to Daniel. My daughter deserves to be happy, and if you're the person who makes her happy, then that's all that matters. Daniel stood and shook his hand. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me. Prove me right. The Voss family's longtime lawyer later said in an interview, I've handled the family's affairs for 20 years. I never thought I'd see the day Robert Voss admitted he was wrong. That mechanic didn't just save his life, he saved his soul. 3 months later, Clara started teaching art again to disabled children, supported by the Voss Hayes Foundation. Daniel became technical director of the humanitarian aviation program. Ellie often came to art class, running around Clara's wheelchair calling, Miss Clara, today I drew a plane flying in the sky, just like Daddy. During one class, Clara tried standing on practice prosthetic legs for the first time since her accident. Daniel held her hands, speaking softly. Slowly, but don't stop. I'm scared of falling. I'm right here. She took 3 steps, tears and smiles mixing together. That afternoon, Robert sat on a stone bench, watching them laugh and joke together. He said to Vanessa, I used to think I kept my daughter safe by locking her away. Now I know love isn't a prison. The Foundation's first project was a mobile art studio that traveled to hospitals and rehabilitation centers. Clara designed it herself, working late into the night on the plans. Daniel found her in her studio one evening, surrounded by sketches and blueprints. You should rest, he said. I can't. There are so many kids out there like me, stuck in beds or wheelchairs, thinking their lives are over. I want to show them they're just beginning. He knelt beside her wheelchair. You know what I see when I look at you? What? The bravest person I've ever met. You took your pain and turned it into purpose. That's not just strength, Clara, that's grace. She cupped his face in her hands. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have. I just gave you permission to believe in yourself again. The mobile studio launched 3 months later. Claire and Daniel drove it to its first location together, a children's hospital 2 hours north of the city. Ellie sat between them, chattering excitedly about all the kids she was going to meet. When they arrived, 15 children were waiting, some in beds, some in wheelchairs, some with visible disabilities, others with invisible ones. Clara wheeled herself to the front of the group. Hi, everyone. My name is Clara. 3 years ago, I was in an accident. I lost the ability to walk. For a long time, I thought that meant I lost everything. But then I met someone who reminded me that we're not defined by what we've lost. We're defined by what we do with what we have left. She looked at Daniel, who stood in the back with Ellie on his shoulders. Today, we're going to paint, and I want you to paint your dreams. Not the dreams you had before, but the dreams you have now. Because those dreams are just as valid, just as beautiful, just as worth chasing. By the end of the day, the walls were covered in paintings. Bright, messy, honest, hopeful. One boy, no older than 10, painted a picture of himself playing basketball from a wheelchair. I'm going to be in the Paralympics, he told Clara confidently. I believe you, she said. And she meant it. That night, driving home, Ellie fell asleep in the back seat. Daniel glanced over at Claire in the passenger seat. "Thank you for today," he said. "Thank you for every day, for sitting at the wrong table, for seeing me when I couldn't see myself." "Best wrong turn I ever made." She reached over and took his hand. Outside, the highway stretched ahead, lit by street lamps and starlight, carrying them forward into a future neither had imagined, but both had somehow found. "From this day forward, I choose to see people for who they are, not what I expect them to be. I will live with courage." 1 year later. At the opening ceremony of the Voss Hayes Rehabilitation Center, Clara gave a speech. "I used to think the person sitting at the wrong table was just disrupting the story. But sometimes, that's how destiny puts the right person into your life." She looked at Daniel, who was holding Ellie, her eyes full of peace. After the ceremony, she said softly, "If you hadn't sat at the wrong table that day," he smiled, "I would have found you anyway. Some paths don't need maps." The final scene. At sunset, the three of them sat at the literal right table, the old table at Moonlight Café. Ellie asked, "Daddy, Miss Clara can walk now. Does that mean we won't sit at the wrong table anymore?" Daniel laughed. "No, sweetheart, because from now on, any table with her at it is the right one." They laughed together, steam rising from their coffee cups, the sky outside turning honey gold. But the story didn't end there. 6 months later, Clara walked down the aisle at their wedding, slowly, carefully, with her father on one side and Daniel waiting at the other end. Every step was a victory. Every step was a choice. Every step was proof that wrong turns can lead to right destinations. When she reached Daniel, Robert placed her hand in his. "Take care of my daughter," he said. "Every single day," Daniel promised. The ceremony was small, intimate, just family, close friends, and the kids from the art program, who had made them a banner that read, "Love finds the right table." In her vows, Clara said, "You sat at the wrong table and changed my life. You saw me when I was invisible. You believed in me when I had given up. You taught me that the best love isn't perfect, it's present." In his vows, Daniel said, "I was looking for someone else and found everything I needed. You taught me that bravery isn't fearlessness. It's choosing to try even when you're afraid. Thank you for being brave enough to let me in." Ellie was the flower girl. She scattered petals with such enthusiasm that half of them ended up in Daniel's hair, making everyone laugh. As they kissed, the room erupted in applause. Clara's wheelchair sat empty at the front of the room, a symbol of where she'd been but no longer where she was. Later at the reception, Robert gave a toast. 3 years ago, my daughter had an accident that changed her body. 1 year ago, she met a man who changed her soul. I thought my job was to protect her from the world, but this man taught me that sometimes the world has exactly what she needs, if we're brave enough to let her find it." He raised his glass. "To wrong tables and right love." "To wrong tables and right love," everyone echoed. Years later, the Moonlight Café put a small plaque on table 7 where it all began. It read, "Sometimes the wrong table is exactly where you're meant to be." And every anniversary, Daniel and Clara returned to that table, ordered 2 cappuccinos, and remembered the night when getting lost led them home. If you believe courage and kindness can still change the world, share this story and subscribe to HA Stories. We tell real moments that remind people how good it feels to do the right thing, even when no one's watching.